Hello, my name is Selena, and I'm part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles webinar team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. The mission of the Foundation for Inner Peace is to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles. And we are holding these Let's Discuss online webinars as an expression of our vision of extending love through A Course in Miracles teachings. Today's Let's Discuss webinar is Forgiveness Can Be Fun, and it's being brought to you as a live event. We're so happy you are joining us for the next hour and a half. This is a session which is an invitation to put forgiveness into action and heal the perceived divide amongst the different versions of A Course in Miracles. Within the course community, longtime students have likely encountered confusion and controversy among the different versions of A Course in Miracles. If you are a newer student, you may not even be aware of the historical deliberation which has surrounded the various forms of the teaching over the years. No matter which version you study or prefer, we are happy to hold a reflective discussion, perhaps one that's long overdue, with our guest today. Those who sponsor, represent, teach, or publish diverse versions of A Course in Miracles. Please know that the Foundation for Inner Peace is not accepting donations for today's webinar. This conversation is a gift to the course community from our panelists. We also thank the Foundation for Inner Peace Board of Directors for supporting this webinar to be live so that the course world can see that the Foundation for Inner Peace wants no control over editing anyone or anything in this discussion. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our companions today in a lively and loving discussion to hear shared perspectives. In this webinar, Tam Morgan will be joined by Robert Perry, Reverend Tony Ponticello, Reverend Vicky Poppy, and Glenn Hovemann. We will let each introduce themselves as who they are in this world of illusion, what they do, and what form of A Course in Miracles they represent. Hello, everyone, and welcome to you all. I'd like to begin by giving it to Tam, who will offer a prayer for all of us.
It's going to sound a little garbled with Zoom, but we all are very dedicated to this prayer together. So I want us all to say it. I don't want to say it for everyone. I'd love us each to say it. And here we go. Ready. I am here
only to be truly helpful.
I am
I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal.
Fantastic. Hopefully everything else will be a little bit more clear than that, but we do mean that prayer, and we really are here to only be truly helpful. First of all, I want to express tremendous gratitude to and for the panelists who agreed to come to this particular, possibly controversial webinar. I also want to note, amidst many perceptions running around, that despite my being told that each of you would probably choose not to talk with me in this forum, in fact, each one of you here has met me and this invitation with nothing less than warmth, kindness, and the extension of love. Thank you. So why are we here, and what is this for? This is not for arguing or proving whose perspective is right or wrong. This is for lovingly laying our perspectives out on the table, looking at our differences, and coming together as course students to show the course community at large how to practice true forgiveness, or at least this is our intention. I'd also invited Doug Thompson, who was of the Urtext, to join, but he remarked that this gathering discussing the true differences in the versions of the course, excluding Robert Perry, would be, and I quote, rather like asking the butcher to give a lecture on mad cow disease to a class of veterinary students. Yeah, he probably knows what it is, kind of, sort of, but really, is that expertise? This was his comment to me. And both he and Robert Perry have indeed been incredible course scholars. And still, I am grateful for this panel with Robert to at least open a discussion that has not yet been had amongst all of us. And this may just be the beginning of several discussions. So hopefully we can have the course that incredible course scholars come as a webinar in the future. Anyway, in this discussion, I would like to remind the community at large that the course teaches us perception is a mirror, not a fact. This said, there is still some legitimate facts in our world of form that we like to uphold to try to clear up confusion in our path through illusion to truth itself. For myself, I come to you as an open book. Which book we'll decide later. But I do represent the Foundation for Inner Peace's book that's being called the Blue Book or ACIM FIP book. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll answer them as best I can. But remember, I'm no authority and no scholar and no teacher, and only come from my own perspective, but with a very open-minded heart. I think it's definitely as important, if not more important sometimes, to listen to each other as well as each to speak from our hearts. Amidst all that said, I'd like to offer us all my favorite reminder of what not to forget as a representative collective of God's Son in this panel. And this is in the course statement, and God's Son forgot to laugh. So let's not forget to laugh at our nutty little egoic defenses, or as we're each so committed to teach only love. So now we're going to begin with a 3-minute go round of each of us describing which version of the course we represent, what our version is officially called, what its public, I would say, nickname is, like sparkly, purple, pearl, etc., and briefly how it came into being. If there's time in this round, feel free to also describe how the version you use differs from the others, or if there's not enough time, we can leave that for another round. Selena will keep track of the time, and like in the Academy Award acceptance speeches, she'll give a gentle warning to wrap it up if any of us are about to exceed our time offering. So let's start with Robert Perry. Go for it. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And as I said to you, I really commend you for doing this and following your guidance. So I'm honored to be here. I will do my best to do this in 3 minutes. So here goes.
Okay. It's informal.
Okay. For me, I always thought I became a course student in 1981. And for 10 years, I thought that that was virtually all that Helen received. And then when Ken Wapnick published his biography of Helen, Absence from Felicity in 1991, there were like thousands of words in there that I had never seen. I didn't know they existed. And I was captivated, absolutely captivated by them. And so I studied them. They influenced my understanding and practice of the course. And then 10 years after that, when first the Hewlin Casey version leaked out, and then the Urtext came out, and eventually I got a hold of an electronic copy of the notes, I just became absolutely convinced that so many of these words were too valuable to Course in Miracles students, too valuable to my own practice of the course to just be left on the cutting room floor. So it seemed to me that there was a situation that someone had to rectify. We formed a team. We transcribed Helen's shorthand notes and basically edited a new version afresh. It was clear that Jesus wanted editing. He talked about it with Helen and Bill. So we tried to follow the principles that he laid down so that we would come up with something very user-friendly, but with an absolute minimum of change to the words that Helen took down. So that became the complete and annotated edition, I guess called the Purple Book, popularly. Thank you, Tony. And that was published in 2017. I absolutely love that it's out there. I love using it. And at the same time, I don't understand what the controversy is about. Like, I would love to see everyone just relax about the different versions of A Course in Miracles. It's the words of Jesus. So we all, believe we're holding a book, maybe we consider it our scripture, that contains the words of Jesus. And if there are other versions that have some additional words of Jesus, well, heck, it's all the words of Jesus. So I've never felt that tension or controversy, and it's been curious of me to kind of watch it. And I know you've seen it too, Tam, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this. So I think that's it.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Reverend Vicky. Vicky may have her grandchildren in the background. We may hear that joyous noise, just to know. And welcome. Thank you for coming, even though you are babysitting today, especially. Thank you.
Thanks, Tam. And Robert, it was so nice to hear you speak about that. And I really thank you for hosting this, all of you, because for me, it's like you brought together a big family. And you said, let's have, it's like having a family reunion, whether we've ever met each other or not. It's cousins from everywhere coming together. Traditionally, it's called the Communion of Saints. And when you come together with those who share the same love, that love makes you immediately brothers and brings a kind of familiarity and love. So I thank you for that. So this is the Sparkly, or the Sparkle edition. And of course, all of this came about from the court case. And the first thing I have to do is I have to thank, most of you or many of you know Teddy. Teddy Poppy was my husband. We were married for 24 years, separated, divorced for a while, and then back together the last few years. And that in itself was an incredible experience of forgiveness. And his greatest love or greatest joy in time would have been to be here, Tam, with all of you. This is the team, and he is, and I know that. So I'm really honored and grateful to be here. So of course, all this material came about through the court case, and that's a whole other thing. And the truth is, Teddy was good to ruffle a few feathers. He could do it very well and passionately, but that was all part of it. And everyone, Ken, the foundation, the academy, everyone did their part perfectly. And the fruits of it are the expansion and the extension of the principles of the course in all of these different forms, whether it's Course of Love or Choose Only Love or the Sparkle or the Purple. They're all the same message: to live this, to forgive, to let go of all our sense of separation, and to enjoy our lives, enjoy living by grace. And I work for the party division of JC Central, so I've not been so much involved with the formal speaking and teaching and all that. I've run parties for 40 years. We do gatherings, lots. We did. That kind of era has kind of changed with COVID, but we have done gatherings, and it's been around any version at all. So basically I'm here. I have to thank Teddy. I thank Ken. I think everyone played their part beautifully. I've always been reminded, don't worry about what Helen said to Bill and Helen. Remember what he's saying to me right now, and to live by that. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you called us all together, because this just opens the field of communion. And that's what we really are called to step into. So this is a wonderful place to launch from. So thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Reverend Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tam, for asking me. Thank you, FIP, for hosting this. I think it's wonderful that we are all here. And I am Reverend Tony Ponticello. I'm the executive minister, that's my title, of a very long-standing Course in Miracles organization named Community Miracle Center. We were formed in 1987. We grew out of a previous organization that was formed in 1985. I was one of the founding members of both of those organizations. So I've been doing this work for a long time. And it's been wonderfully transformational. So for the first 20 years of studying A Course in Miracles, of course, I studied the Foundation for Inner Peace book, which I loved and embraced. And I still think all the versions have their pluses and minuses. So, all the versions have their pros and cons. Actually, if you're going to be a Course in Miracles student for a long period of time, you should read them all. I mean, at some point, I know you may have your favorite, but pick up the other one, join a group that's reading that version and go through that one. I mean, it'll keep it a little more interesting for you anyway, and you always benefit from reading the course. So read them all at one point or another. So after studying the FIP version, there was always a couple of questions, like in the movie that FIP produced, The Story of A Course in Miracles, there's a place where Bill and Judy Scott go and talk to this religious woman in the United Kingdom, high level. I forget exactly who she was. She looks like a nun, but she was really at a higher level than that. And she's talking about the course and how meaningful it is for her. And then she talks about this phrase that was really meaningful for her, called the celestial speed up. And I thought, where's that? I've read the course about 6 times, and I don't remember ever referring to the celestial speed up. And these are days before computers, and I figured, well, I must have just glossed over it. I'm going to read it with intention again and see if I can find. And I didn't have a way to search the course back then to see if I can find the celestial speed up, and I never found it. And then the copyright controversy happened, and the court case happened, and these earlier editions happened. And sure enough, when I was reading the Hewlin Casey version, there it was, the celestial speed up. I go, oh, so this person had access to a different version of the course. And so why did she have access to this version? Why, so all these questions loomed. There was also something in the first chapter that said, talking about the Great Crusade, and I'd always really liked this. Something resonated with me about the idea of a Great Crusade. And so I used to talk about it. But then when I read the earlier versions, first of all, the Great Crusade is capitalized, like, oh, this is a named movement. But then they said that the Great Crusade had a slogan, and the slogan was listen, learn, and do, with an emphasis on doing. And then Jesus goes on and talks about how important doing is. And I go, whoa, this is an amazing teaching. And so that's when I started gravitating, not that I have anything against the Foundation for Inner Peace book, but that's when I started gravitating to the book that was based on the Hewlin Casey version, as is the Sparkly, that later became the book that I sort of embraced, which is Course in Miracles Original Edition. This is sometimes called the Pearl book because of the cover with the pearls on it. There's a story behind that. I won't get into that now. Probably many of you know it. So that's the book that I personally use as my go-to book. But I will say that my organization, the Community Miracle Center, we sell all the books. We study all the books. Several of my teachers who teach classes use different versions of the book than I do. I am currently leading a class that is slowly going through the text. And thank you, Tam, for reading that thing from Doug Thompson. The fact that you even spoke to Doug Thompson is amazing. That he would speak to you, and I appreciate his comments, and I am forgiving him for not listing me as one of the scholars. So, but anyway, Doug is a character, and I'm glad he was represented in some way. Anyway, so I have embraced these earlier edits, but I think they're all great. And as I said earlier, be open-minded. One of the characteristics of a Teachers of God, the last one, is open-mindedness. So be open-minded. If you're going to study this thing for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I've been studying for 40 plus years, at a certain point, read a different book. Read one of the other books. It'll just make it a little more interesting, a little more engaging, and you'll learn something more. I've read them all. I have not read the Sparkly, but I know it's very similar to the book that I read. But I read them all. I've gotten tremendous value out of all of them. I'm currently with a group that's about halfway through the text. I read Robert Perry's Circle of Atonement edition thoroughly with all the cameos twice. with a group. Wonderful. They're all wonderful. Read them all. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say I didn't read Doug's comment to put anyone down, but just to bring to the conversation, you know, he represented just how he actually thought when I reached out, I was reaching out for yet another threatening of a lawsuit. So he had experienced a lot of, you know, communication, certainly in the earlier days with Foundation for Inner Peace about lawsuits because of copyright and this and that. So I just wanted him represented in that way. He'll represent himself or he won't at some other point. But I did find him, I have a lot of love for him without knowing him. He's done amazing work as I see. So, okay, now we have, this is a little alternate. We have Glenn. Glenn, why don't you tell us what you do and what you're here with, which is a little bit different than A Course in Miracles itself. Go for it.
Thank you, Tam. It's so nice to be here. Delighted to see you all and also to have an audience. Tam, I want to salute you because I think you're courageous and you're generous. And I remember the first time we met, it was in Utah at the 50th anniversary of the publication of A Course in Miracles. And I came up to you and I just introduced myself. Hi, I'm Glenn Hovemann. I'm the publisher of A Course of Love. And you gave me a big hug. And you said, I remember it real clear, you said, A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love are not in competition. That is so true. And it also demonstrated what Reverend Tony was just talking about, the last of the characteristics of the teachers of God being open-mindedness. So I salute you for your open-mindedness. Mm-hmm. I was living in Oregon in a community in 1978 when a visitor, I don't even remember, I never saw her before or after, came up to me with 3 blue hardcover books, 1978, and said to me, Glenn, I know these are for you, please take them. She didn't say anything else. She didn't say it was from Jesus or anything like that. It was just, Glenn, please take these. So these were the 3rd printing. And so I looked at it. I didn't know it was for Jesus. It was just, I started looking at it. And I recognized the voice. I recognized the voice. So I knew I could trust it. So, you know, life goes on. And for a while I was in law school. And it was so interesting because I purchased all the cards, those little cards with the lessons on them. And I had them in my pocket as I was going to law school. So I'd come out of courts or contracts or whatever, go to the library and I'd take the card out of my pocket and I'd read the lesson for the day. And it was just a fabulous contrast of worlds. Time went on. There was my soul, you know, and I was very familiar. I was doing the workbook every year. I was studying with Ken Wapnick, among others. Go down to Temecula, study with him. My soul was calling for something more. I knew there had to be something more. It was just calling me. So one day, I was online and I discovered this conference that had happened the previous October. This was the end of February of 2013. And I knew pretty much all of the presenters. And but I didn't know one person, and that was Mari Perron. So I looked her up. And it turns out that she had self-published 3 books, A Course of Love. So I bought them. I figured, well, I'll read these in the next couple of weeks. You know? Well, I cannot speed read the truth. And it just went through me like lightning flash. It was illumination. because what I discovered was I was understanding A Course in Miracles more. It's certain aspects of it, particularly, I found developed more in A Course of Love than I was looking forward to. So it was exciting for me. I then figured, well, I'd love to meet Helen and Bill if they were still kicking, but that wasn't possible. But Mari was still alive. She lives in Minnesota. I used to live there also, and I went to the university there. And so we arranged to meet for a couple days. And to my surprise, she asked me to publish A Course of Love. And my wife and I were publishers. I published children's books, mostly about nature. And at first I said, no, this is a different genre altogether. But the question lived in me. And so the next morning I called her and says, did you mean what you said? She said, yes. So basically, my wife, Muffy, and I decided that if all the lights turned green, we would do it. But the major one was that we needed our staff, our small staff in the publishing company, which was Dawn Publications, to welcome this. And they did. So that became Take Heart Publications. Take Heart Publications is the publisher of A Course of Love. It's also now the publisher of Choose Only Love, which is a whole different, it's also from Jesus, and it's huge. It's 7 volumes. It's 1,400 pages, and it's amazing. But I'm not going to get much into that in this webinar, because I do respect that this is really about the course. And so I should my time is probably up, so I think I'll quit now.
Okay, well, thank you. And one of the reasons that people have asked, why is Glenn on this? He's not publishing the course or representing the course. And the reason is because A Course of Love and Choose Only Love are extremely popular in the course at large community. And there's been so many arguments going back and forth and discussions, but true arguments. Oh, this is the same voice of Jesus that Helen heard, or, but it says some very different things, and you can research this and see the differences that it does have. And I have to say, we have very often, at least once every month, if not a few weeks, different people coming through the foundation saying, I am hearing the same voice Jesus, the same Jesus voice that Helen has heard, and this has to be related, so you have to publish it. And we do get that a lot. And I think that with what Glenn does, he really does publish one that's very, as I say, very popular. And I wanted to include that within the discussion, to not exclude it, and to not confirm this is the same Jesus or not same Jesus. It's, my feeling is, well, I'll say my little bit. My little bit is that I am the publisher now of the Foundation for Inner Peace version of A Course in Miracles, which was a kind of lineage, and it was handed down directly from the scribe to my mother to publish and bring to the world. It was guided, the decisions in the publishing, the practicing of the course in this version was given to my mother, and then basically handed over to me, not really, but handed over to Robert Rosenthal, who asked me to be his partner, and I reluctantly did, because this was not my path or my business. And then my sweet partner, Robert Rosenthal, who said he'd manage most everything, actually transitioned with the brain tumor, 2 brain tumors. So here I am, and I am looking at all of this, all the controversy, all the lawsuit, having lived with my mother, who had a heart attack after the lawsuit, for reasons that if anyone's interested, I'll give my perspective. But this version, and I will call it a version of A Course in Miracles, was what Helen decided through listening. One can challenge that. Was this through Helen's listening, through her ego, whatever, decided to give to my mother to publish. And so I refer to it just in my little community as like, we have something from lineage, like the Queen of England to the King of England to the crown jewels that are handed down. We're not Parliament. We're just polishing, and we try and keep up and, you know, put out the little crown jewels here. From a perspective that I have been given, Helen was much more interested in a certain way in the vibration of the download she was given. One of the only audios that we have of her was talking about how she never heard the course in direct words per se. Not that she didn't write notes about what she heard, but her translation was in what she liked to refer to as the symphony of the course. So that all of her edits with Ken, with Bill, this is what my perception is, were to try and bring it to this symphony. To me, it reminds me of like the Kabbalah that has the Hebrew letters, and each letter has a vibration to it. And she was trying to get the specific vibration that she was hearing into this version of the course, clean of all the other notes. Now, that includes clean for her, and we can discuss, you know, forever, clean for her ego or clean for her hearing, whether this included the things about sexuality and about the different things that other people can bring up that were not put in this version. I do not know the answer. I can give you further perspective on it through Helen's personality, who I knew as a teenager and young adult. And I invite you each to ask me anything within the controversy of this. So I don't know we can ever clear our alternate perceptions. As the course says, the moment we have, you know, an opinion, therein lies chaos. I just paraphrased. But if anyone wants to bring this up, I'm really open to discussing my perception of this as well as yours.
I think what you're bringing up is at the heart of this whole thing. And obviously, this is not something we're going to solve, you know, the five of us today. But central to this whole issue is, what do we make of Helen's editing? Because I think it's a fact she was really the editor, far and away the main editor. Ken Wapnick confirmed that. There, you can tell just by comparing the versions. You know, there's a belief out there that Bill kind of produced a version. I don't think there's any evidence for that. There's a belief that Ken Wapnick kind of took it and ran away with it and edited it, and we have him to blame for all the editing. I don't think there's any good evidence for that. There is no evidence for that. Helen was the editor. And so the issue is like, what do we make of her editing? And one way to look at it is that she kind of received this kind of rough, raw material. And then as she edited, and there were a bunch of editing passes, you know, over years, it got more and more guided, like the editing was guided. And so the material got better and better. Another way to look at it is that it was purest when she heard it from Jesus. And I don't want to be too controversial, but I would really invite you to carefully read that interview that you referred to. I talked about it with Dr. Bob a few years back, or corresponded with him about it. You can go through, she consistently talks like she heard words. Nowhere does she say she didn't hear words. So that's something we can't clear up right here, but I would invite you to kind of go back and look at that. So my conclusion, as I looked at, like, we can say her editing sucked, we can say her editing was divinely perfect. We should look at the actual editing. And having looked at thousands and thousands of instances of her editing, my personal conclusion was that whereas she was an amazing channel who brought something through that was beyond the human, as an editor, she was very human. She was as human as the rest of us. So we will come to like really different perspectives depending upon where we land. If she received raw material and the editing was guided and made it better and better and better, we'll land in one place. If she received pure words and her editing kind of made it worse and worse and worse, we'll land in a different place. And like I say, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, but I think that's at the heart of the editions issue.
Okay, I will respond after you, Vicki.
Thank you, Tam. Thank you, Robert. So from my understanding, and all of us have limited understanding, when all the material became available, it was written in the Casey version that the brothers that went to the Casey library found this version that Helen and Bill sent to Hugh Lynn because they wanted to know, what did he think of this? And in that, there's a comment from Jesus that Bill was supposed to edit the material and take out the personal things, and that he would know what was appropriate and what wasn't. Now, to me, none of that truly matters. It always matters that we live the message ourselves. But the information shows that perhaps there was an edit that Bill did with Helen before they met Ken. And that's what I think Raja Joy, who is the first and who still publishes the Pearl edition, and this Sparkly edition is that book. It's the book they found at the Casey Library and kind of very illegally Xeroxed off copies. And then it became available, and we all helped do that, to send out to everyone. What I want to say, two things though here. I want to mention the word Doug Monkton. Doug Thompson did a wonderful job in presenting the first text in a way that it was available to many people. Doug Monkton, another brother that many of us don't know, spent 10 years of his life transcribing those scribal notes that came through the discovery process of the court case. So I do want to mention that. The other thing I would mention, not that it changes the practice, but in the Casey version and in the other versions, the word soul is put back in. And because I'm sitting here knowing Teddy's on my shoulder, I have to make sure that I mention that sense of being souls of God. Even though we are one, we are souls that can make a choice to continue to sleep or to awaken, to continue to live in self-will, or to ask thy will be done, and choose only that. The other thing that the thing that I want to mention with the Sparkle, and everyone makes their material available. It was Teddy's passion, and it was his assignment to live these principles and to forgive himself and everybody else for everything. But the form that took in his lifetime was to make A Course in Miracles freely available to the world. And he and many, many brothers, this edition of the Course is one of the best demonstrations of collaboration of anything I've ever seen. The brothers at the Academy and then others have somehow joined, each one when they were called to. It's amazing, from the ones that went to the Casey Library, to the ones that were part of the court case, to brothers today who Teddy passed a year ago in his body, put his body down. And I truly believe because he fulfilled his purpose. He asked for forgiveness everywhere and offered forgiveness everywhere in his personal experience. And he finished putting this book out and left us with $20,000 to make a new publication. And I do want to mention that it is freely given to anyone and everyone that just asks. And any donations that anyone makes goes to publishing the next printing. So the brothers that did all of this, from the Academy, from here, there, and everywhere, still are doing it. So, and there's a website that you can go to, or you can just go borderlandorders@gmail and ask for a book, and it'll be sent to you. So I wanted to mention that. And whether it's Bill's edit or Helen's edit, to me, how can it matter? We're here to live this and to celebrate it. It's like picking apart a flower instead of smelling it, and passing it on to each other and enjoying it and being ever so grateful for all of it. So I'm ever so grateful to all of you, but I wanted to get that in there. Thank you.
thank you, Vicki. I would say, you know, I have always hoped that this could be free and out there, all of our versions. We finally got to put it online, you know, through our web edition, which is for free and for donation, but it took a long time for sure. I just wanted to say, as far as Doug Monkton goes, I did get a message from him because he was invited as well. And I will read you his message to me, which said, "Hi, thank you for the invite. The UR, as published by MIAP, contains a preface and appendices by Doug T. that fully explain its role in the publishing of ACIM. The author, in big capital A, the author must be laughing all the way to the library. Blessings, DM." So he's here in spirit as well. There was certainly receptive, at least communication in all of this. Now, I want to say, as far as just to respond from my own perspective here, I've done channeling myself. I've gotten out of the way and gotten my own messages. I've heard my own guidance that I used to call as a very, very young child, my friend. That was my connection to source throughout my life. Long before A Course in Miracles, I've always had this, and that's what I listen to. And there are times where it comes through and I write, and the writing is definitely words. So I think what I meant to say, that I obviously didn't say very well, was that the vibration, the sound, goes along with the transmission of feeling. And once you step into words, I can only speak for me, not Helen. Once I step into words to translate it, I'm already one step away from the truth, that which is truth. And when we get in this world of form with the words, you know, certainly I've looked at something that's come through and cleaned it up afterwards, because it was like, I did that so fast. I want to make sure it goes with that vibration this way. And as I say, I can't sit here and tell you what Helen's ego mind came through and go, I don't want that in there. The sexuality, I can say very much, I knew this woman to be a beautiful, proper, white glove kind of small, petite lady who cut up and had cut up every single picture of her in a more heavily weighted body in her life. All these pictures of her heavy are gone. Helen did care about her reputation. She did care about how she was seen in the world. And as proof, lying on her deathbed, she looked at my mom and said, you know why I'm getting out of, you know why I'm dying, don't you? And my mom said, why? And she said, to get out of its way. She knew that being here and with her judgments as they were, would get in the way of all of this opening. And she also didn't want to be embarrassed. She was of two minds. This material, she believed completely. In her heart and in her mind, she challenged it constantly. And she was a difficult persona. So I would never sit here and say that Helen every single second listened to the voice that was, within even the editing. I don't know, but I do know that there is a lot of information showing there are things that were not put in according to her decisions. And in that, I respect all these other versions. I'm interested. I'm open to seeing them all now. I'm getting very involved in this, and I have great respect for them all. But I will say that in my own experience of what happens in channeling, intuition, and source, and I can't tell you that was Helen's experience. I can just tell you mine, is that it uses the being and personality that is here, that's receiving the information, which is why Marie Perron's voice of Jesus might sound or appear different in message than particularly Helen's, and they also might unite. I don't know that. I don't know how that works. I just know that each person who will say spirit, and you can say Jesus, or whatever you want to say, this came through, this lineage came through came through in personalities. There was Bill, who was a closeted gay man and CIA, very secretive. And he didn't want to be out there for being known for certain things as well. He might, in his supposed edit with, not supposed, his actual edit with Helen, I can't tell you what ego came in and went, not that, maybe not that about sexuality, especially when it said that this sexuality was his last frontier, sort of. I'm paraphrasing again. Someone, Robert, you can say exactly what it said. Or you, I promise I'll call on you in a moment, Reverend Tony. But I do want to say that in the perfection of all of us being here, it was equally as perfect that the course came through the personalities of Helen and Bill, then brought in Ken and his personality. I mean, some people might feel he's a right-wing fundamentalist in the course version, a fantastic teacher in his own right, but through his understanding of it. And my mother, through her, I was actually reading Reverend Tony put out, like, okay, after a year of Judy, being gone, I can finally say that she's a liar again. And one of the things that why she wouldn't publicly come out, she didn't care. Her job was to do what Helen had given her and Helen had asked of her, and she had blinders on. This is a woman who just didn't care about community, meaning it's not that she didn't love people, but she wasn't interested in what the course community was doing. She was interested in bringing the version of the course that she thought was at that point the only version of the course to the community, because this is what her guidance told her the moment she touched it. That's what she was told, bring it forward. And my mother, I'm here to say, was a fabulous storyteller. She was fantastic. And did she exaggerate things? Oh yeah, she did. It's why I haven't even read her part of Double Vision, the book we wrote together, because when I got to the part where she said, I exploded light bulbs, that never happened. The light bulbs blew, like when a light bulb blows and you turn it on, but they never shattered. And we argued. And I said, that's poltergeist. There was not poltergeist here, and she said, well, that's my version of it. It's like, fine, but I'm not reading your version because you're so kind to be doing this with me. That's a whole other story, Double Vision, that I respect that, but I'm not going to read it. So my mother was like this and like this with stories. And because she was like that, the first couple of years where she traveled 100,000 miles, and the next year almost as much, she impassioned people about the course because of her enthusiasm and her own particular style of storytelling. Good or bad, we'll fight forever about that, perhaps. I don't have a judgment about it. I know I could be calling the kettle black at this very moment in her exaggeration, because sometimes I'm prone to the same, and I'm a writer. But in watching what Spirit did with the people who started this and brought it to us, I'm saying there are no mistakes. It came through personality. And in my particular case, before my mother passed and I saw, oh my God, am I going to have this on my hands? This is what I have to go through. She looked at me several times, not just once, and said, I had a contract with Helen and I had to fulfill it. You do not. You didn't have that contract. You do what your guidance tells you, because I've always trusted in your guidance my whole life. And that's what got me to the course in the first place, was hearing and watching your guidance with you. So I said, okay. And that's my deal with Spirit. Like, I'll only do this job if, one, it's fun, and two, if I can do it as me. And it may not be an agreement of anything that's come past, but I do absolutely know it's come through different personalities. And thank God Reverend Tony's out there saying his truth and what feels strong to him and not keeping it back. And each one of us in these versions that really do, as Vicki has said, that do teach love. So, okay, I'll be quiet. You go for it, Reverend Tony.
Okay, thank you, Tam.
Yeah.
And thank you for reading articles on the Community Miracle Center website. I appreciate that.
Okay, and I love you putting all the differences, whether they're deep and scholarly. You got it down for enough for a layman to go, oh, that's the difference. So I do recommend people look at that. Okay, thank you. I wanted to give a look, because I'm watching the chat here. A lot of people don't really know about all the different versions. So, and I want to reiterate something that Mr. Perry said, that, you know, Helen is a channel, great. As an editor, maybe not so great. So I wanted to talk about just, well, what are the differences? You know, so people are talking about the versions and the editing, and some people think the editing made a difference. So just briefly, what the editing did is the course became more general, more abstract. As it went along, it became more abstract. In the earlier edits, there's more of an active engagement with the world, and that is actually stressed. I mean, the whole thing about the slogan, listen, learn, and do, he says, he continues, he goes, the first two, obviously listen and learn, are not enough. It's not enough just to listen and learn. He says, the real members of my party are active workers. So the thing about doing, the very first thing that Helen heard and wrote down is, you will see miracles through your hands through me. And that's lost. I mean, that's lost even in the Hewling Pacey version. So it's not in the original edition or the Sparkly. You got to go to Robert's Circle of Atonement edition or the Urtext to just get that. And then it's repeated later on in the first day's channeling, I believe. And so you think about, that was the introduction. That was the introduction Jesus really wanted for A Course in Miracles. You will see miracles through your hands through me. I mean, that's a very different idea than nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, herein lies the peace of God. That's abstract. And there's nothing wrong with abstraction. There's certainly a place for it. But all throughout the earlier edits, and then especially if you look at the things that actually were personal material, that you know was probably appropriate to be edited out, and Robert has included many of those things in the back of his book in what he calls the cameo essays, which he then comments on. You see that Jesus was giving them very, very specific instructions about how to live their lives, things to do, people to talk to, where to go eat, where to go shopping, what kind of coats to wear. And so this idea that A Course in Miracles is a mental exercise, that it's not about doing things in the world, that it's all about how we perceive the world, and that doesn't translate into actual worldly things. Okay, the subsequent editing moved more and more to that direction with like every pass through. And so that's I just want people to know that. So there's a real difference, I believe, in the message, because the message of the earlier edits is more of a true active engagement in the world. That your new perception of the world is going to engage you in the world in a more active way, and you're going to be a miracle worker in the more practical, down to earth sense, and not just the miracle will be I will perceive things differently, but that doesn't change anything that I perceive, anything that's out there. See that so I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's important for people to know, especially people who don't know the differences about these editions. And and again, I will say, read all the different editions. And now I want to give a plug to Mr. Hovemann here too, and A Course of Love, because you know, there's a very controversial passage in A Course in Miracles in all the editions about the real world. And it says the real world is not like this, and it talks about, and the real world is like the healed world. And he says, and in the healed world, there's no day and there's no night. It's always light. And you know, everybody like, what the hell is that? How can we have a world that's always light? But Jesus, through Mari Perron in A Course of Love, kind of addresses this. He goes, in a time when there's no more night, he goes, you wonder how that could happen.
And he goes, but don't worry about it. Your scientists will just find a way to describe it once it happens. And I mean, that little bit of just kind of him addressing it in this subsequent work and his sort of light way of talking about it, it just made a whole lot of sense to me. It made that teaching richer for me too. So there's real advantages to reading all the editions. I know I'm talking. Robert, in his book, he explains little things here and there. And he explained a passage for me that has stumbled me for like 35 years. It's swear not to die, you holy son of God, you make a promise that you cannot keep. So, you know, it's hard. I didn't quite know what that meant. It's like, okay, swear not to die. Don't die. Don't die. And then it says, you make a promise that you cannot keep it. But wait a minute, you just told me to promise not to die, but now you're telling me I can't keep that promise? So that puzzled me. It didn't make any sense. But Robert explains it. Swear not to die means stop promising to die. Stop promising to die. That's the promise you can't keep because you can't really die. You know, if I spent 2 years reading Robert's edition, and if that's all I got of it, and I got way more, that was enough. That. So thank you, Robert, for that. And there was so many things I got from all of your stuff. So yeah, have an open mind. All of these books, and there's a lot to reinforce what Tam has just been talking about too. The Foundation for Inner Peace book is the one that Helen authorized. It's pretty well edited. It's clean in its editing. And, you know, there's something to be said about this is the legacy. This is what Helen wanted. She gave it to Judy. Judy ran with it. This is the book. And that's a very, very valid point as well. So read them all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I only have one thing to say, which is the only thing I question in everything you have just said is when someone comes up and says, Jesus wanted Helen not to do this. I mean, Helen and Jesus were in relationship. I think Jesus wanted all of this. Jesus wanted Helen to put in exactly what she chose to put in, if you want to call it that. And she also wanted the version at the Hugh Lynn Casey to be stolen and Xeroxed, and the one at the Library of Congress. Jesus wanted all of this. So to say, oh, he didn't want what she did, it wouldn't have happened. If we really believe in Jesus and source and this will, it wouldn't have happened. And it all did happen in perfection. And I think all of this whole thing is what Jesus source wants, including this conversation here, or it wouldn't be happening. Believe me, if Jesus didn't want this, it would have gone blank from the moment we came on. And that's all I have to say about it. I just suspect when people say Jesus wants this, but not that, but not this, and not you, and not that. That's the only thing I take issue with. Thank you. Vicki, and then definitely Robert and Glenn. We want to start wrapping up a little.
I just want to support just what you said. The way that it was edited with Ken, the way it was edited with Bill, the way that the material became more available, it all suited our readiness because every step was such a great example of using our weaknesses as a blessing for everyone. When we turn whatever our weaknesses are, Helen's or Bill's or Ken's or anybody's, to the Holy Spirit, it comes into that natural symphony of love expressing and expanding in exactly the right order that fits our readiness, our cultural readiness. I think Ken was so wise. If he kept the things about sexuality and the rest of it in the beginning, it wouldn't have been palatable to the culture at the time. When it came out, there was a readiness for it. And that's what I feel about all of our material. It's heartwarming, it's exciting. And I think as we live this, our greatest gift to each other is to support all of the hearing, all of the sharing, all of the ways that it expresses. Not just like he says, it's a universal course. The course is one version, Course of Love is another version. The Bhagavad Gita is a version. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
And thank you, Vicki. I also just wanted to say very quickly before Robert and then Glenn, that it just makes me giggle the one that's called the Thetford edition, because Bill used the FIP Helen edition. I mean, he was alive for quite a while, and he went through the same, at least similar experiences what Ted went through. He really did it. And at the end of his time here, he was full in the practice of forgiveness, and he got it, and he was clean and he was free. But he did use the blue one that he helped publish, and he was, along with my mother, directing. And one could ask, well, why then didn't he use the Thetford edition that was his? There's many reasons. We could all make a ton of stories around it. It doesn't even matter to me that Bill used this one. I just giggle when I hear the other one called the Thetford one, when he always walked around with the blue one. So anyway, I'd like to turn it over to you, Robert, because you've been quiet and I know you don't barge in. So I'm inviting you to.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know how much I have to say right now, except that I've been seeing a lot of things in the chat, comments in the chat say, hey, what about forgiveness? We thought this was the forgiveness thing. And I want to speak a bit to that. Basically, I mean, I know that the theme here was all of us coming together is an act of forgiveness. So I think that's what was in your mind. But I think we also can talk about forgiveness under this heading of the different versions, because the fact is that forgiveness does come in strongly later in the text, really in chapter 9. And by chapter 9, the differences between the different editions have pretty much calmed down. There's still little ones, but the big ones are gone. And so, as an interesting point, the message of forgiveness is exactly the same in all the different versions. There's kind of a message of unity here. You know, what Tony said, I thought was really well said about the earlier drafts, you know, having this more active engagement with the world. There's a lot of truth in that. I mean, everything you were saying, Tony, I was like, yeah. I do think that's not so much an editing, like that Helen was trying to take those themes out. I think she was trying to just take out references to concrete things in the world. So the early course would just be more lofty and poetic, like the later course. I don't think it was so much a bias against themes, although I think in sexuality there was probably some of that. But for the rest of it, I think she just wanted a lofty, poetic early course. So what Tony said, I think, was absolutely right. But that all happens before we get to the big rollout of forgiveness in chapter 9. So whatever book we're talking about, whether it's the FIP, the blue book, or whether it's the original edition with the pearls, or the sparkly edition, or what we call the CE, the purple book, you're going to find the exact same message of forgiveness, which is the central teaching.
Which is that none of this ever even happened. And the invitation to this webinar is because so many of us still really get attached to form in the world of form. And there has been, as I say, a lot of animosity amongst each other or amongst different teachers. And, you know, I come in and look around and say, how can one course teacher be publicly denouncing another course teacher? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? And that's the purpose of this webinar, is to say, for me to say, anyone want to ask me any question that I can answer that you're angry with, or that you still hold an old belief system about, let's see if this time here can be to release that, to move on, to see how we can move on together. I mean, I got one comment that the only way we can move on together is that if FIP admits it's a liar and we close the doors and stop publishing and let other people just take over and the other versions be the ones that are here. That's an option. I don't know what Spirit wants. If Spirit wants us to close down, we'll close down. If Spirit's angry that we charge for the books ever, then close it down. But I'm just open to all of us together doing exactly what we're doing, discussing it. And let's instead of airing out liar comments or this or the negative comments to support any theory. Say, we're all in this together. Can we do this for the course community now? All be in it some way together. And that's all I'm asking for. And if any of you are feeling, no, we can't because you're still not admitting, I'd like to admit, I'd like to say, to stand here, sit here and say, I'm really sorry for any of the actions of Ken being litigious in his nature and different things happening that people were caused to disbelieve or question or wonder about the versions. I would like to offer a clean slate for all of us together. And I am very willing and happy to apologize for any of our character flaws in form. They don't matter to me. What matters is that we're all teaching a version of love and this particular kind of forgiveness, and we can love each other. And I personally can say, in looking around this Zoom room, that I'm so grateful for each of you and what you've each done and this purpose here. And I would like us to join in that. But I was really hoping to get to that in the last few minutes. But as you say, you know, a lot of people are asking in the chat, why is this forgiveness? That's what I say is why. I think we can each go around in the end of why this is forgiveness. And can we come to that and have a moment of truly experiencing it together? But first, I'd like to give Glenn a say.
Thank you, Tam.
Yeah.
And thank you, Robert, for bringing up forgiveness. It's terribly, terribly important.
Yeah.
To me, you know, A Course of Love doesn't emphasize forgiveness so much because it is fundamental to love, and it's all about love. And it's fascinating. This conversation is fascinating by editing. A Course of Love is unedited. There's no editing. And I'd like to, and we're talking about Helen and all, and I'd like to just for a moment talk about Mari. Mari was engrossed in A Course in Miracles. She read it 7 times in 2 years in about 1997, 98. And then she had a dream. Just like Helen had these incredible dreams, Mari had a prophetic dream, and it told her, you can no longer sell your mind from money. Your mind now belongs to God. Wow. Well, she was working at the University of Minnesota, and she quit her job. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew something was coming, and she had been told that her mind belongs to God and wasn't to be sold for money. She waited for 9 long months, not knowing what was going to happen before the dictation started. Mari, I totally respect Mari as a true and reliable channel. She was not conflicted. She didn't have the inner conflict. She's devout Catholic. When Jesus, in the prelude, quite at the very beginning of A Course of Love, he named it A Course of Love. And when Mari took that down, she was concerned. In fact, she told me something like, she felt like, oh boy, that's not going to go over well. And she was right. Because when I then published it and sent out several dozen copies, complimentary copies of this big fat book to, you know, the who's who in A Course in Miracles, basically the leadership ignored it. So a few were hostile to it. A couple, particularly, you know, Reverend Tony here and John Mundy, were open-minded. And I appreciate that so much. So one of the things that A Course of Love says, Jesus is saying, is that it is a continuation of A Course in Miracles. It's kind of like you know, the analogy is the symphony. You have a movement, and then you have another movement that develops it further, expands it, amplifies it. So that's how I see what A Course of Love is doing. And in it, Jesus says, quote, A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love work hand in hand. I'd like to point out two things that I think are distinctive about A Course of Love. One is A Course in Miracles is outing the ego, and that's huge. A Course in Miracles is a course essentially in mind training, and that's very important. A Course of Love reiterates the basic thought system of A Course in Miracles and then seeks to integrate the mind and the heart, because the heart is the portal of the divine. And so what Jesus says here says, we take a step away from intellect, the pride of the ego, and approach this final learning through the realm of the heart. And its aim is union. Its aim is a direct relationship with God, which is beyond learning. You know, as we know, although love cannot be learned or taught, it only recognized. So by integrating the mind and the heart, that is A Course of Love's aim. Another key distinction, I think, is that A Course of Love has no ministers, it has no teachers, no organizations, no training programs, no churches, and really no leadership. And Jesus made sure that there wouldn't be. He said, the only correct interpretation of A Course of Love is that which comes from each reader's own internal guidance system. Unlike in other learning situations, there is no correct answer or specific set of beliefs to be adopted. So in the Course of Love community, we don't have study groups. We have lots of groups, but they're sharing groups, they're dialogue groups. Because A Course of Love is asking us to go into the heart and hear the divine. And of course, it's giving us a lot of words to help us do that, but that's the essence of it. I'd also like to mention that, and I appreciate the particularly the original edition folks, because on our website, acourseoflove.org, there is a tab where you can search, okay? And you can search for just inside A Course of Love, that's fine. There's another tab in which you can search simultaneously in A Course in Miracles, original edition, and A Course of Love. And you can put in multiple words and multiple phrases, and it's just a fabulous tool.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. And, you know, as they say, there's controversy as to some very distinctive, I'm not the scholar here. I mean, Robert could answer this, but distinctive differences between the two. And that's where that controversy is. I don't care. I care that we love each other. I can really that we love each other, and that, as Reverend Tony was stressing, and I think all of us now, you know, look at all of them and see which one suits you. I've talked to so many people who say, look, I switched over to this one, and this is the reason why I feel more, you know, real with this version, or this version is more, as Reverend Tony was saying, you know, about action in the world. And some people say, this one, you know, the blue one is the one that is totally for me. It's just simple, direct. I don't have to deal with side notes. I don't have to deal with anything. It's just as it is here. And I do podcasts every week. And I have to say that if the blue version really isn't up to snuff to a more expanded version, I'm still wildly impressed by the forgiveness stories each week that come on these podcasts of people using this version. And that's not to say that any of your versions wouldn't give the same. It's just the competition needs to stop, as far as I'm concerned. It's just, you know, it's just people's preference. We come in so many different flavors and different ways to come to it. And, you know, and I will say that I really do think, Reverend Tony, you are a scholar as well. I'm glad that Robert, you know, gave you the go ahead there. But is there anything else that you would each like to add to that, or to ask so that there can be continued clearing of any bad feelings. There's some things have been like a dog and a bone. And if I can help that, I would like to.
Well, I'd like to add one quick
okay.
thing.
Go ahead.
And that is that there are no scholars associated with A Course of Love.
Okay.
It is not something that is dug into in a scholarly way. The focus of A Course of Love, one of the distinctive things about A Course of Love is that it goes into feelings, deeply into feelings, which, it just hasn't done that in A Course in Miracles particularly. It's more about the mind. But in A Course of Love, it is hugely about the heart and feelings, how to work with them, that there are no bad feelings. Anger is not a bad feeling, and it's something to be worked with, but it's a learning opportunity. It's a growth opportunity.
Thank you. Reverend Tony.
I was raised in an Italian-American family. And when we got together at dinner, everybody talked loud and forceful, and we bickered. And,
Sounds like the Jews.
Yeah, that's the way we were. And now an energy has gone through our whole culture that to do that means you're fighting. I never perceived that my family was fighting. We were talking. That's how we related. As a matter of fact, if you didn't do that, if you were a little quiet and aloof and too polite, they was, what's wrong with you? It's like that was the rude thing to do. So in essence of, if we're all going to be talking together, it's going to get animated. And it's going to get, people are going to have emotions. It's the fact that we can all do that together that's amazing and loving, and shows that we love each other and we do forgive each other. Forgiving each other doesn't mean that I'm going to have my opinion and Robert's going to have his opinion, and maybe we agree on something, but maybe we don't agree on some other things. And sometimes we talk about something we don't agree on. Maybe we get a little heated. That's fine. That's how robust dialogue happens. And I think what we need in the whole world, but in our spiritual community and in the course community, is a robust dialogue where people feel like they have permission to say what's on their minds and to say it with the emotion that they feel they have, and that don't get shushed by saying you're not being forgiving, or aren't you being judgmental there? Why don't you just love each other? Things like that. So I'm all for what Tam was saying, I do think, and it's amazing. Again, a lot of people have given you kudos for putting this together, and I will give you more kudos. And I heard you saying that you were willing to apologize and say you're sorry for some of the litigation things that happened. We've had a little chat about that, so I was happy to hear that. I'm all for robust dialogue, and I'm all for us. I don't really perceive that there's all that much controversy amongst the versions anymore. I mean, maybe certainly during the court case and for time afterwards, but I do think, people get along pretty well. But we're going to get them. We have to have permission to be ourselves and to be normal and to have that robust conversation. It's good for the course. It's good for miracles. It's good for the world. So thank you. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I will say, I very much agree. That's what this webinar is for. There can be future ones. I'm told that a lot of the newbies here don't even know what the controversies are. If you really want to go into it, you can look up online and you'll see what they are. I would like to just move on personally, but anyone can do what they want. One of my favorite forgiveness moments was between myself and Reverend Tony, who were in very different courts. And I was asked what I thought about him. He was being very vocal against the Foundation for Inner Peace at that point. I closed my eyes and I saw him as Darth Vader, and I just felt all this love. And I was asked, it was by David Hoffmeister, really, are you loving him right now? And I said, yeah, because I'm from New York. I like grit. I like people being right up front about what they feel. And I also feel like he sees us as Darth Vader. And what is Star Wars without a little Darth Vader? I mean, it's kind of boring, to tell you the truth. So yes, I love him. And then within 2 days, he and I were in conversation, and we got to see each other, and we were in a car together, and I brought a present, and we each had a bag, and he said, "What's this?" And I said, "Open it." And it was a Darth Vader mask. And he said, "What do I do?" I said, "Put it on." We both put it on. And then he said, "Now what?" And I said, in a little voice changing thing in the mask, "I am her daughter." And the two of us just started laughing, and we're really respected and friends ever since. So that is one of my forgiveness stories here. And let me go over to you, Robert.
All right, thank you. I want to put a little accent mark on Tony's comment about robust discussion. We can disagree, right? But in love, without name calling and without using liars and such. And I also just want to say that it's great to see you at work, Tam, and see what you're doing and the things you're saying. So I look forward to seeing where it's all going. And the last thing I wanted to say was that I think the more focused we are on this is my path, and I just want to walk the path. I want to understand the teachings. I want to do the practice. I want to be the person the course is trying to lead me to being. The more that's our focus, I think then the issue of the versions kind of falls away. That is the central thing, walking the path.
Thank you so much. And I will say that the comment that kept coming to me from different people about this webinar, which is history in the making, it was, "Oh, you're fearless." And I kept saying, "No, I'm not. I don't know what's going to happen here. I am brave." And it is one of my qualities. I am brave. I will not, like my mother, who was the most non-confrontational person I've ever met, and it served her. I am confrontational. And I said, I'm brave, but I'm not fearless. And what I do with the fearlessness, that's where the course comes in. The course teaches me what to do with fear and to help transmute it into love. And you have each helped me do that in this situation. And as I say, this isn't the last gathering. It doesn't need to be. If there is conflict, confusion, needing apologies, whatever it is, needing just love, let's join together. Let's show the course world at large we are together. No more of the other stuff. And this is our forgiveness gift. The gift of forgiveness to this entire community, no matter what version. If you switch now from the FIP version over to the text or to anything else, do what your inner guidance tells you to, and add, of course, love, anything that teaches you to bring love to this world, change your perceptions from fear to that love. We all invite it, and we're all shifting, and we want you all to see that we have no beef against each other. We really are in the same work to teach only love, because that is who we all are. So thank you for joining this. And does anyone else want to say anything? Because otherwise first I'll ask that. Anyone want to add anything right now? Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left, and I just want us all to sit here and experience the love that not only we are doing by having this conversation together. I still invite the two Dougs or anyone else who holds anger to come forward to discussion, because maybe we can include everyone who feels that way. Maybe we can have a big old webinar where everyone's angry and comes, and let's just switch it now, because that's the work we're committed to. Unless you're just a scholar of the course and not a practitioner, which is fine too. But really, with our community, thank you all for showing up, listening in, and I mean the audience too. Sorry to those who are newbies who thinks, what the heck are they all talking about? But this is really to bring up the past for clearing. We could move straight into forgiveness where this never existed, but this, I'm told, this is important. for each of us. And I am happy to come to any one of your podcasts or webinars, and to join in love with each of you. So thank you, thank you. And I just want to take literally 30 seconds of silence. I know it feels like a long time, and Selena, tell us when it's over, to just get in touch with that feeling instead of all the words. So thank you.
Are we feeling complete?
Thank you. We started this with, we usually start our webinars with the tingly, spiritual, twinkly fairy music and end it with such, but we started this one with Why Can't We Be Friends by the group War, and we are going to end it with one of my favorites. This was, to me, almost as difficult as getting the Beatles together. And so I've chosen to use this one. I don't know that this can be on the YouTube version of this because of copyright, and God knows we don't want to infringe on that. So I don't know that either end of the music can go on YouTube, but we will close with this. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Love is the way we walk in gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.